Just two lost souls swimming in a fishbowl, year after year, running over the same old clowns. But have we found the same old fears? Wish you were here. Greetings and salutations to all of you lovely, fluffy, non-fluffy, beautiful, and absolutely wonderful listeners out there. We are here for another episode, and I'm sort of still trying to get the schedule of this worked out, but you know what? Until that happens, I'm just glad that I'm getting this up now. And I'm sure some of you have been wondering what's been going on and where I've been. Well, I've been working on main channel videos quite a bit, so hope you're keeping up over there, and I can tell that a lot of you have. So thank you for that. But yeah, we've been streaming and we've been on a pretty consistent upload schedule on the main channel, so you can kind of see that when one channel is consistent, the other one is not, and it kind of goes back and forth. Gonna be fully honest with you, maintaining channels of this variety at this time, these many times, and the amount that I do is it's a lot. I'm not gonna lie, it's a lot of work. It's probably easier for some than it is others, but you know, for me in particular, it's a lot to manage. So I try my best, but I'm just glad that you all out there are so patient and so lovely with your kind comments, and I'm glad that those of you who do listen to this have been very, very generous with your words and letting me know and asking when the next episode will come out. So, that shows to me that people are interested, and I will continue to keep doing this. So we'll see how consistent it gets to. Anyway, I hope you also liked that intro. I've been toying with it. As you all know, the last podcast we did, we started off with Green Day's Good Riddance, Time of Your Life, and it got received very nicely. So thank you all for your kind words on that as well. But I think I've officially made that in addition to the podcast. So every podcast intro, we will be doing a song, or at least a tidbit of a song. So that one that you just heard was Wish You Were Here by Pink Floyd, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with. Kind of relevant to what we're talking about today. And topically speaking, I have a sort of a word salad in my brain of things I want to talk about, but we'll see what we can tackle. But first, I want to talk about smells. Okay, so that sounds like a weird segue, and it is, but when did I ever claim to be good at segues on this podcast? Never. So, and including streams and videos. I've never been good at segues. I don't do them well. Smells. So, I was thinking back to one of the first cons I ever went to, which was Megaplex, actually. And a lot of you know the story of Megaplex and driving there and, like quitting my old job, getting a new job, and in between that, just going on a 16-hour road trip to my first furry con, and it was all worth it in the end. It was indeed. Um, but yeah, I remember something very distinct about that old location that we were in. It was at the well, I'm not going to say the hotel name because legal reasons, but it was in downtown Orlando, about a stone's throw from Disneyland and Universal. Um, Something that I will never ever forget about that hotel was the scent that they used, particularly in the convention space. I don't know what it was. I don't know what fragrance or beautiful magic they used for that particular like area, but I just remember walking in those doors for the first time and picking up that smell and going, wow, that is delicious. Like, I don't know what it is. It's kind of a cross between, like, it was a air freshener, sort of a laundry detergent freshener, and strawberry pomegranate, sort of a strawberry pomegranate laundry detergent. And that may not seem like it's very fancy, but that smell is permanently interlocked into my memory as being something special because it was my first furry con, you know? So I was thinking about the 21 Pilots lyric from Stressed Out. Um, Sometimes a certain smell would take me back to when I was young. How come I'm never able to identify where it's coming from? I'd make a candle out of it if I ever found it. Try to sell it, never sell out of it. I probably only sell one. So that right there is a good example. If I could somehow capture that smell in like some sort of a, I don't know, like a jar or, a fabric or something, and just keep it under plastic, just as a memory, I would do it totally because that was the first furry convention I'd ever been to. And that is, yeah, that smell, when, even if it's something that comes close, takes me back to that simple time of going to my first con and just being like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. And from it's a very optimistic memory from ever getting that scent anywhere. So I have noticed that other hotels use a similar smell with their environments just because, they don't want like maybe the chlorine from the pool or like, just the smell of the crowd, if you know what I'm saying. Um it's a nice sort of additive to their environment, I will say. So I want to know. So the only time I would ever go back to that hotel, now that we've moved, the only time I would ever go back is just to walk inside and get a big inhale. That's it. And just reminisce, and just be like, yep, this is where I was for my first con ever. So I don't know, just a little something I was thinking about. Like, I should somehow get that smell captured, or I should contact them and be like, hey, what air freshener do you use? I'm curious. So, yeah, speaking of memories, that's kind of what I wanted to talk about today was sort of the memories of times past and the people past in your life. And when I say past, I don't just mean those who are no longer with us. I mean the people in your life that you miss, How I wish you were here. Just two lost souls swimming in a fishbowl year after year. And I bring this up because I had my therapy session tonight, which went very well. And I talked to my therapist about a dream that I had this very afternoon, actually. Um, it, um, it, I'm not gonna describe everything that happened in the dream because it's very odd, but it, sort of ended, the dream ended with seeing a message from an old friend of mine on screen, like pop up on screen. And it was like a chat. I just remember in the dream there was a on-screen chat feature and seeing the words from this person that I used to know. And the message went something like, "I'm concerned for you," and I woke up after that. So that got me to thinking, wow, I haven't thought about this person in a long time. I wonder how they're doing. You know, we've had our differences for sure, but I do wonder how things are going. And we haven't talked for a while, and yeah, I could reach out, but it's just one of those things, And I just that dream really got me thinking. Like, there's a there's a good amount of people that I don't contact anymore, or I haven't heard from, or that I miss talking to. And a lot of them that I currently know that I struggle talking to as well. And not because of who they are, but just because it's a lot. I'm going to be honest, it's a lot to get to those messages, and there's a lot of messages to get to. So that can be a real stress point in my life when um, you have a lot of contacts in your phone or over the years. Sorry, I had to pause. I had to sneeze. Excuse me. Uh, anyway, what was I talking about? Oh yeah. Yeah, it can be overwhelming having the amount of people that especially in something like the furry fandom, and struggling to get back to their messages. And but in particular, this dream really got me thinking about those that I have not talked to in a long time, and whether it was, we just, drifted apart, or I lost contact, excuse me, I lost contact entirely because maybe they deleted social media, or changed their number, or maybe it was a fallout. Maybe there was a falling out of some kind. And I will admit, I have had a few fallouts over the course of the past, I would say, like 5+ years, and not getting into details for very obvious reasons, but that those happen too. And you know, at this point, I'm not faulting anyone. I'm not faulting me or them. We're the way I see it, especially with fallouts, is you're two different people in two different places in your lives, and sometimes that leads to compatibility issues. And maybe there was some anger, maybe there was some resentment or bitterness, but truth is, I'm in no position to hold anything against anybody at this point. It's even yeah, like there's no reason to. And yeah, um I could tell them that. I could try to contact them and tell them that, but you know, there's still that sense of it's probably better if you don't, you know. Not that you hold a grudge against them, not that you it's not that you're holding a grudge, but it's that you remember what happened. It's good to remember what happened, to keep those things in mind, because there's a reason that you're not talking to them now, and you don't want to restart anything that could potentially be a problem, you know? So it is true. Sometimes it is better to just keep your distance. It's better to not contact them. It's better to let sleeping dogs, as they say. Um, but yeah, I'm happy to say that I don't really see any faults anymore. I don't, I know what happened, yes, and I remember what happened, but it's not something that I think about as like in a bitter or an angry way. It's just, there's a reason that we don't talk anymore. There's a reason that we're not as close as we once were, and it's okay to have those relationships in your life, and sometimes they just fall away, you know? And on top of that, it's still the possibility that later on the road, when times have changed again and you're in different places again in your lives, maybe you rekindle. Maybe you find common ground again. Maybe it'll be different in the future. It's hard to say. I've known people in my own family, they've rekindled things with old friends, and some family members that were estranged. So it can still happen. It can still very much happen. Um, but yeah, sometimes you got to let those things happen naturally, if that is what is to happen. And if not, then be willing to make your peace with it, you know? So, yeah, on some level, I do wish that they were still here. I do wish that we still had contact at times, and I still wish that we had the relationship that we had, or a better one than that. But, you know, it's also very important to keep aware of your own mental health and your own mental hygiene, as it were, and your own what am I trying to say? There's a specific term that I'm looking for your well-being. You know, if that person or if that relationship wasn't good for you, and there's a reason why it's not happening now the way that it was, then there's a reason for it, and maybe it's better to stay away. It's probably better to stay away than to try to force it, because you can't force a relationship. You can't force emotions or feelings. You can't force a any sort of, you know, like you can't pretend, is what I'm trying to say. So, um, you got to know when to say no, as my therapist would say. You have to know when to say no, and you know when to say, this is not good for me, or it's not good for me at this time, or whatever. Maybe someone's trying maybe you're looking to date somebody, maybe somebody's looking to date you, and you make the decision, I'm going to go full send into this, or I'm going to step back and, you know, put up a boundary. You have to do what's the right thing for you at the end. And you know, it may hurt, it may be harsh, the fallout may be ugly. Some people might have hurt feelings or try to get you deplatformed or whatever the case, but you know, I like to think that in the long run, it is for the better. You know, I've talked about a particular friendship, um, that I had some years ago back in high school, on the podcast before, but I think it's worth mentioning again. Um, basically, longtime friend back in high school, friends with my entire family, basically, with my brother, me, I was friends with them and their sister, their sibling, I should say. And um, they ended up moving away, and that changed the dynamic of the relationship very quickly. Having them long distance was not easy, but, it was very different online than it was in person. Um, And what ended up truly breaking down the friendship, like what broke the friendship apart, was the fact that they could not accept that I was a furry. And as harsh as that sounds, it's not to blame them in any way. It's not to make them sound like the bad guy, because they weren't. They saw it as something to be concerned about, and they saw it as something of a problem. And I could not change their mind. No matter what evidence I presented, no matter what type of narrative I used, no matter what truth I used, or what what I told them about it, just did not convince them otherwise. So, yeah, that led to a lot of long, hurtful conversations, and eventually I cut them off because they were telling me that, well, they weren't telling me, but let's just say that they took the bullying route with it, and I did not appreciate that. You know, the fact that they didn't understand it, and that they uh, were telling me that it was not good for me, et cetera, et cetera. You've all heard the story before, so I'm not going to repeat it. But you know, um, they resorted to bullying me for it, and I did not appreciate it at all. So I told them to stop. Never did, and it just got worse, and it kept going. And then finally, I was like, "All right, we're done here." I got a very harsh message from them that same day when I cut them off. But all that to say, that was a relationship that had changed dynamics. That is a relationship that I do miss at times, and I wonder how they're doing. As a matter of fact, I do wonder myself what would happen if I were to see them in real life at any point in the near future or in the future at all. And I don't know how that would be possible because they live very far away from me, but or they used to live, or I don't know. Honestly, I don't even know where they are right now, right? It's been 13 years since we last talked. So, I just I don't know. I really don't know what to make of that. If we were to run into each other, first of all, would we recognize each other? And second of all, what would we say to each other if we did? Would we make awkward eye contact? Would it pick up right where it left off, back to anger and, you know, harsh chats? Or would it maybe we just go about our days like we never saw each other? I do wonder sometimes what that would look like if it were to ever happen. So now I do wish I had handled it better at the time, but I was 16 at the time. So in what way does a 16-year-old handle things maturely, in all honesty? I could have been nicer. I could have said some better words, but you know, um, that's not necessarily a regret as much as it is a learning experience of what not to do when you're cutting somebody out of your life. So, um, probably better that we didn't talk after that because or tried to work things out because it would have, I think it would have resulted in something more poor. So, anyway, that's just something I wanted to share. It's been on my mind lately, that dream that I had and talking to my therapist about those who have sort of come and gone in the past, and of course those who are no longer with us. I want to I'll never forget them either. But all that to say, it just goes to show that no matter what, you're gonna find those in your life that are gonna come and go. And whether you consider them friends or acquaintances or best friends is totally up to you. That is something that is entirely your decision and your agreement with that person. Like, I'm sure some of you furries out there, especially, have been in the situation where somebody calls you a friend and you've only met them once, right? Um, that reminds me of um, one of my old coworkers from some years ago. He, I did not really like this guy that much. I didn't hate him. Like, I think hate's a strong word, but like, I just, he and I, we were very different people, and that's okay. Um, but he was a very particular type in that he he had a lot of excuses for not doing work. Let's put it that way, right? So that being said, he tried to manipulate me a lot of the time, and maybe manipulate is a strong word too, but he tried to get me to do things that he didn't want to do. And I read his game immediately, and I was like, no, I'm not doing that. It's your job, you do it. So, but he was a smooth talker, at least he tried to be. Um, he at one point told me that he considered me one of his best friends. My response to that was, "Oh, interesting." That's what I said. "Oh, interesting." So, yeah. um, it just that's an example of someone that maybe plays you a little too close, and you are not in agreement with the situation. Like, you didn't really consult me on this whole best friend business. Maybe we should reevaluate. Like, I can barely see you as an acquaintance, let alone best friends, so maybe you should go find friends elsewhere. Yeah, that's kind of where I was sitting at the time. So, and rightly so, you don't want to be in disagreement with someone who maybe has a different idea of what a friend or a best friend looks like. So I'll say this, all that to say, um, you will know who your real friends are in your life by the way that they treat you, by the way that they treat others, and in turn, how you treat them. So I'm not saying necessarily playing favorites. I don't think that would be it. But I think it's more in the sense of it has to do with how you get along and how your overall feeling is with that person, right? So you can, because we can consider a lot of people our friends, right? I think that I have a lot of friends. I think I do. But there are some in my life I would consider closer friends than others. And it's not, again, it's not a playing favorites thing. It's more of I just happen to vibe with this person a little bit more than I do other people. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. Nothing. You know, there's a sort of a funny little conversation I had with someone I know recently, and we were talking about how sometimes it feels like a fight or a competition um, with some, like you consider certain people to be closer to you than others in your friend group or in like a group of friends or whatever the case. Well, I would say it's not a competition. It never should be a competition to be friends with somebody because that is exhausting. That is very exhausting. Trust me, I know from experience of pulling those moves of competitive friendship, right? And let me just say this, when you have to when it seems like you have to compete to be somebody's friend, or you have to continually prove yourself to that person who you're trying to be better friends with, I got a newsflash. They're not your real friend. Okay. And that may be harsh sounding, but it's true. They're not your real friend. They are playing you. They're most likely playing you because it's fun for them, or maybe they get a rise out of it, or, maybe they want to get things out of you that you may not be willing to give, you know? So that's where the whole, that's where the whole concept of trust but verify comes in. You know, we can trust, sure, but we need to also verify the source, right? So if you really want to know how somebody truly is, especially if they're a new friend and you're not quite sure about them, or maybe you feel that competitiveness coming up, or you feel like you have to give and give and give and give, and they don't give a whole lot back, something you can try to do. And this is not in any way speculative thing. It's not something to be malicious or sneaky, but maybe ask around to their other friends. Just like, hey, I was hanging out with this person. Just curious, like, how did you guys meet? Like, what do you think of them? And you may get 10 different answers about that person, but look for patterns, look for ways that you can verify that relationship and ask yourself if it's really worth it, you know? And it's okay to let it go if it's not working out, or if it's not um, doing well for your mental health, or heaven forbid, it's causing you stress and anxiety, like I can think of a relationship slash friendship right now in particular that I have. Um, someone that I do consider a friend. I do. But a lot of the time, it feels like a chore. I won't lie. It feels like a chore. It feels like it's I don't know how to describe it. It just, a lot of times it feels like roadblocks, because it's really hard to relate to this person. And I'm sure it's the same for them. It's hard for them to relate to me. And that right there is an example. That's nobody's fault. It's not something that, it's not something that can be forced. You can't force certain things on different friendships, right? And do I think I'll end this friendship? Does it need to be cut off? No, not necessarily. I don't think it does. I can still be their friend. It may be challenging, but you know what? I think it's worth it. I do. I think it's worth continuing to go after. I think it's worth getting to know them better. I think it's worth the time that I spend with them, and like really getting to that level of understanding them, because I think that's where it truly does matter. Is one of the one of Stephen Covey's rules for life, rules for development. And I've talked about Stephen Covey before, an author that I really do appreciate. Um, one of his rules is seek to understand, then be understood. Seek to understand, then be understood. So it can be really challenging to make that first step and to try to seek that person out and understand them and get to know them. And because human nature at its finest, everybody, we love to talk about ourselves. We enjoy talking about us. We love us. You love yourself, okay? Even if you disagree, you love yourself. Let me just say, there was a study, and I do a lot of references to studies and quotes, but it's so relevant. There's a study done by the Bell Telephone Company, and it was trying to find the most common words used in phone conversations. And wouldn't you know, the top 3 words that came out of this study, the top 3 that were used the most: I, me, and my. Sounds like a Beatles song, doesn't it? But no. And by the way, I should also mention this study by the Bell Telephone Company, taking a survey of the most common words, 3 most common words used in telephone conversations, that is a source from the 1950s. Okay, that was a study done in the 1950s. So you can probably imagine how much worse it is today. So, human nature at its finest. We love to talk about ourselves. So, a good rule, going off of what Stephen Covey says about seeking to understand first, ask about them. You know, like lean into it. In a weird way, leaning into it will get a lot more success than if you try to counteract with something about you that they're probably not interested in. And it's not to say that they don't take an interest in you generally. I think they do. Like if you're going to be friends with somebody, I think it's a mutual exchange that you have a mutual interest in each other. But if you one of the steps to having a successful relationship is to like truly and genuinely seek to understand that person by asking about them, by asking them questions about things and getting to know where their head is at on some things. And like, oh, hey, tell me a story from your childhood or something like that. And by the way, one of my favorite icebreaker questions when it comes to meeting new people or even with my own friends that I currently have, one of my favorite questions to ask: what's your favorite dinosaur? That definitely gets some answers chattering, let me tell you. What is your favorite dinosaur? It's a simple little question, but hey, it works. It's an interesting icebreaker, and it seems to always do well. I don't know why, but it's just a very out of the blue question that can get some people thinking and talking. So, well, that being said, all that to say, good point of wrap up here, I think, is I wish you were here. Those people that I met in the past. I'm sorry that we don't talk like we used to. I'm sorry we're not as close as we once were. I'm truly sorry that things didn't work out. I wish they could have and could have gone better. And that's not to say that it can't in the future. We still have those opportunities in life, but just letting you know right now, I do not regret the time that we spent. And I do miss you. And I miss the times that we had together that were good. And I'm smiling because they happened. I don't hold any grudges. I don't hold any, bitterness or, you know, I don't hold any contempt against you because I like to think that the further that we've drifted apart and the longer it's been, the heart has grown fonder and more respect than before. And I hope that because of it, we are wiser. So I wish you all the best. And I don't mean all of you. I mean, like, to them. You know what I'm talking about. To all those who I've known in the past, I wish you the best. So that's a nice little healthy exercise you can also try, I wrote that in my journal, and I think it's a good way to, sort of an official send off, a verbal and written send off to those who maybe you're estranged from, had a falling out with, maybe have passed on, or, you just drifted apart naturally. So, you know, you'll make peace. You will find peace in the ending to those relationships. So I hope you got something out of that. I hope this helped to see those relationships that have gone past in a new light. And I'm going to let you know once again, it's okay. It is okay. It doesn't always work out, and that's all right, you know? As long as there's no bitterness, hatred, contempt, or, resentment in the end, that's what truly matters. So I want to thank you all for listening. Thank you again for your continued support on the main channel and, the streams and here and all many platforms of social media that you follow me on. So, once again, I'll say it, like, I would not be here if it wasn't for you. I would not be doing any of this if it wasn't for you. And I may sound like a broken record talking about it, but I will continue to talk about it. It is true. I am so grateful that I get to do this every day. And yeah, I can't thank you enough. It really does mean the most. And yeah, I'm looking forward to our next conversation and looking forward to the next episode, next stream, next video, next whatever we come up with. So yeah. And also remember the Latin phrase sic Parvis Magna. Remember greatness from small beginnings, where you started, where you began your journey, because there's greatness in every step, whether you create it or whether you find it. Don't forget those who come up with you, who brought you up and stand by you today. Make sure you let them know that you love and care about them, because you never know what tomorrow will bring. And always remember to be you, be yourself. There's never been anyone like you. There's no one like you right now. And there will never be anyone like you in the future, because only you can do the things the way that you can, the way that you do best. No one can ever tell you otherwise, what you can and can't be, or what you can and can't do. That is for you to decide. So be unequivocally, unapologetically, and unwaveringly you. Why? Because everybody else is taken. So that being said, I want to thank you if you listened to this far. Appreciate you. This is Samson Kitty Fox, and I will see you and hear you in the next episode. Bye-bye. Bye. Love you. Meow meow.